Okay, so Doom Eternal: The Ancient Gods Part 2 just launched, and it's a game my sister keeps laughing at because she says the name is too long and random, and I just hope she never sets her eyes on Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 Intergrade, or the entire Kingdom Hearts franchise, or, God forbid, Near Replicant version 1.22474487139 dot dot dot. Yep, the dot 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 is part of the actual name, apparently. I love the Doom games. I love the original games, I love the remake, I love Doom Eternal, and I love Ancient Gods, and I haven't played Doom 3, but overall I'd say that every installment is better than the last. But not everyone is on the same boat as me. If we're talking about the two games in this remake miniseries, which is apparently over now, while a lot of people have agreed that Doom Eternal is a far superior version of its 2016 counterpart, there was a huge wave of people claiming that they preferred the old game. People love Doom Eternal for its gigantic open areas and more explorative art design, the constant need to swap weapons, and how it introduced new and more specific enemies that made more use of the different weapon mods. Oh, and also the Super Shotgun had a frickin' meat hook, we can't forget about that. On the flip side, you had people saying 2016 Doom's focus on more claustrophobic encounters, freedom to use weapons how and when you wanted, and more focused experience led to a tighter game overall. This seems to be a common theme with the Doom games, especially this pack of experiences here. People generally love them, but at least to me, it feels like one chunk of the core fanbase always seems a bit disappointed with what's been changed or where the focus is. I don't think that's because the games are bad, I just think the spectrum of players that enjoy Doom is very large and very vocal, and it's almost impossible to please everyone. So what I wanted to do was take that spectrum into account when I'm talking about this, and basically look at Ancient Gods Part 1 and 2 as a whole, and give you a guide as to whether you specifically should buy this DLC or just pass on it entirely. How I'm actually going to do that is through what I'm dubbing the buy or bust system. Basically, let's say I was doing this for Doom Eternal, the main game, I would say it's a buy if you enjoy weapon swapping, and a bust if you don't like enemies designed to be only weak to some weapons. So with your knowledge on not just the Doom franchise, but also your taste in general, you should be able to figure out if you're going to like this new game, or if you're leaning in a direction where it really just won't do it for you. By the end of this video, you should have a sizable list of doodads that should help you decide whether or not to buy this thing. If you find yourself mostly aligning with the buys, I'd say you should definitely pick these up, but if you're leaning more over to the bust side of things, you might just want to pass on this DLC. Okay, I think that's enough preamble, so let's get into this. Also, I suck at this game. Don't judge me, please. I'm trying my best. Buy if you love meeting the challenge of difficulty spikes. Bust if constant difficulty spikes leave you more frustrated than entertained. This is pretty specific to Ancient Gods Part 1, since Part 2 really flattened out the difficulty curve, and in some people's opinion went too far in doing so. Part 2 feels like the same difficulty as the base game, but that feels pretty easy after Part 1 positively shatters your gluteus maximus. You're basically consistently moved from one ridiculously hard encounter to the next. They typically have multiple waves, and enemies that usually meant you were reaching the end of a fight in the base game because they were the icing on the difficulty cake can oftentimes literally be the opening part of a giant encounter in Part 1. For people who really love the difficulty in this game and have a serious handle on it, this is honestly a good thing. It truly tests your skill level. But for people who not only struggled at times in base Eternal and also could get frustrated when a 10-minute encounter kept ending up with death over and over, kinda like me, this was sometimes a tough pill to swallow. I like difficult games, and I loved Ancient Gods Part 1 overall, but I won't deny that sometimes I almost had to force myself to pick up the game again after taking a break because I just didn't want to get fisted by demons for 2 hours straight. That's purely a weekend activity for me. Buy if you like weapon or mod specific enemies. Bust if you prefer weapon swapping to be optional and up to you. Doom Eternal pushed the idea of forcing you to swap weapons more often by not only making ammo more scarce, but also introducing enemies that could be taken down way easier if you use the right weapon or weapon mod. Maybe the most obvious version of this was the Cacademon's weakness to grenades or explosive shotgun shells. Sending one hit from an explosive instantly brings them into a glory kill state, which makes a good use of the normal shotgun, because in the original I didn't really use it since it was the lame shotgun, but here every time I saw a Cacademon I would immediately switch over and try to make use of this weakness. Similarly, there's a new enemy in the Ancient Gods that can be best handled using the full auto mod, a mod that I don't think I used at all in the main game aside from when I was trying to get the platinum. There are definitely more examples of this in Doom Eternal, and the Ancient Gods waste absolutely no time introducing even more enemies that can only be taken out with timed headshots, shooting behind them, using the beam mod for the plasma rifle, and a ton of other super specific tricks. While I personally love how this kept me bouncing from weapon to weapon because I feel like sometimes I get too comfortable with sticking to my shotgun and only occasionally cycling, I know there were a lot of people that hated how you couldn't really play your way in Doom Eternal, and the combat experience went from free to meticulously designed to favor one specific move at any one moment. Go into this DLC knowing that the Ancient Gods absolutely doubles down on forcing you to change weapons and strategies during every encounter. Buy if you've been itching for the series to test your accuracy. Bust if you prefer a guns blazy spray and pray approach. Doom isn't usually about accuracy, it's about speed, positioning, decision making, and boom boom. Almost everything you're firing at is gigantic, and until you get to the point where you gotta headshot those pinata demons, Doom never really asks you to be accurate. As someone who is truly horrible at shooters, this was a bit of a positive for me, but this time around the game asks for way more accuracy for sure. Not just in certain platforming sections, but there are also multiple enemies that require you to send one of your more focused shots like a scoped assault bullet or an arbalist blast towards a small area in the heat of battle, usually only giving you brief windows to pull off that shot before you have to wait for their weak spots to be vulnerable again. This doesn't make the game impossible for people who aren't all that accurate, but sometimes it really slows you down or leads to you focusing too much on any one enemy, which are both usually recipes for disaster in this game. Alternatively, for people who are good at shooters, this means the game is testing you on more than just your ability to be fast and unload a bunch of bullets in a general direction, and eventually, when I got the hang of that new balance, it was a lot of fun. Buy if you think taking breaks from combat through platforming is an enjoyable palate cleanser. Bust if you hate how much platforming was introduced in Eternal. I love platforming, and I think the platforming in these games is awesome. The movement in this game is very fluid, and I like how you're just monkeying and dashing around places. Platforming in this DLC gets a bit more complex and intricate, especially with the multiple sections that require you to complete platforming sections with a time constraint. To me, platforming is a nice way to shift gears and give a well-needed break from the action, which really helps with the game's pace, but on Eternal's release, this was a main complaint that some people had, that there was too much platforming and they just wanted to shooty bang bang the whole time, which is fair, because shooty bang bang is really good in this game, but if you were hoping that they cut down on the platforming for this DLC, it's not the case, although rest assured there's still plenty of combat encounters to go around. Buy if you like unique settings or conditions for combat. Bust if you hate constraining environments or environmental damage in combat. This is one thing that Ancient Gods really dials up to 11, even though it had previously only been like a 4 from what I remember. Usually the most environmental hazards or movement restraints that you'd get were smallish indoor sections, cliffs, and the odd fireball shooting in your general direction. But in Ancient Gods, every other encounter feels like it's got a new trick up its sleeve. You'll be surrounded by poisonous fog that really boxes you in, or you'll be stuck in slime and unable to dash, or the floor will be lava, or you'll be stuck in a forest of electric pillars. You usually had to have a somewhat decent understanding of where you were in these two games to avoid falling to your death, but here you're constantly being asked to adapt and overcome to more specific scenarios that occasionally can even take away from the fundamental aspects of movement in this game. I could see a lot of people hating this, a lot like how some people hated the forceful weapon swapping because it removed player agency. I 100% understand not liking this because it can mess so much with your mobility, which is maybe the most important factor of the Doom games, but also I liked trying to find a way to deal with these unideal situations and constantly keep my wits about me so I wouldn't get screwed over by my surroundings. This is a super contentious one for sure. Buy if you're a Marauder guy. Bust if you wish you could bash Marauders with a hammer. Although, to be fair, you can actually literally do that in this DLC, so maybe that's a buy? I'm just gonna go out and say it. I think the Marauder is the best enemy type in Doom Eternal. That might be my hottest take in this video, but hey, it's my opinion. I get why people hate these dudes, but they are so cool to me. First of all, the design is sexy as hell, and second, I love how relentless they are. You can't not pay attention to them when they're in the battle, and looking for ways to damage other demons in between running from a Marauder and occasionally pumping a few bullets into him when you get good positioning is so stressful in the best way. I'd say the biggest issue I have with this enemy type is sometimes its AI can wig out a bit. It's designed to be super fast and deploy certain attacks if you're close range versus medium and far range, and sometimes when you're close it kind of just herky jerks around. Also, the dog is annoying and unnecessary, and I really don't know why it's there from a gameplay perspective, but still, I can totally forgive those things because I think they're overall so well designed. If you're in my camp, congrats, because you're going to see a lot more of this guy, and more importantly, you're going to see a lot more of him at the same time as you're seeing other mega tough A-list demons, which really wasn't the case in Base Eternal. If you hate Marauders, then dude, I am so sorry. Let's just say you'll be doing a lot of audible groaning and it won't have anything to do with the aforementioned demon fisting. Okay, so I think that broke down most of the elements or points of contention that fans have with these games, and hopefully me breaking down which ones are super present in this DLC helps you decide whether it makes sense for you to spend money on it. Personally, I feel like this DLC is up there with some of my favorites and it's totally worth your time and money if you were a fan of Eternal, but if you're really having a rough time getting into some of those mechanics, or you really hope they would rein it in with certain aspects that really weren't your cup of tea, I hope I maybe saved you a bit of money as a result of not grabbing this DLC that may have disappointed you. Let me know if you've checked this DLC out and what you thought, and if you have other things that I didn't mention in this video, please leave them in the comments because I'm honestly interested in hearing what people have to say about it. Subscribe if you're new and you want to support the channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.